We are on DAF Kuf Nun Amud Beis at the very bottom. The Mishnah was talking about things that you're not allowed to do and that you are allowed to do on Shabbos, having to do with this prohibition of Mimitzo Chefzecha V'daber Davar. There are certain activities that are not a malacha. You're really not doing anything, but you're not allowed to speak about certain things on Shabbos, and you're not allowed to walk to a certain place on Shabbos if it's indicated by walking there, you are preparing to do something for right after Shabbos. So the Mishnah had said that you're not allowed to talk about hiring workers on Shabbos, and one of the things that you're also not allowed to. Thank you so much. You're also not allowed to go to the Tehum. You're not allowed to go all the way to the edge of the place where you're allowed to walk on Shabbos. Thank you. Oh, you're not allowed to go to the edge of the Tehum in order to await workers that'll be coming in so that you can chop them to have them work for you for right after Shabbos. However, what you are allowed to do, the Mishnah had said, is that you're allowed to go to the edge of the Tchum to watch over something that's over there and to prepare to bring it for right after Shabbos. In other words, there are certain things that the rabbis were lenient with as long as it doesn't involve direct preparation. So therefore they said that even though you're not allowed to stand at the edge of the border in order to hire workers, but to schlep peiros, but you are allowed to stand at the border of your of the tchum to watch over peiros, and if after Shabbos you decide that you want to take some of those peiros, since that was not your main objective, you are permitted to do so. So Abba Shol at the end of that Mishnah had made a statement, and he said, Klal Omer Abba Shol. Abba Shol said a general rule. Kol sha'ani zakai ba'amiraso rashayni lahafshich alav. Anything that I'm allowed to say on Shabbos, for any activity that I'm allowed to discuss on Shabbos, I'm also allowed to go to the edge of my tchum in order to be able to stand there for the purpose of doing that activity right after Shabbos. So the question really is, what is Abba Shol coming to add? Abba Shol Ahaya. Well, first of all, the Gemara asks, what part of the Mishnah is he discussing? Ilema Areisha Koi, if he's going on the first part of the Mishnah, which is Ein Machshichin Ala Tchum Lischar Po'alim Lahavi Peiros, that he's talking about the halacha that you're not allowed to go to the edge of the Tchum to hire workers or to bring produce. If that's your primary objective, is that standing at the border of your tchum is going to be to fetch workers or to fetch produce. So, and then comes along Abba Shol and says anything that you're allowed to discuss, you're allowed to stand at the edge of the border. So now we're at the top of Kuf Nun Aleph Amud Aleph. So Hai Kol Sha'ani Zakai Ba'amiraso Rashayani B'Chashichaso. Question mark? Kol Sha'ani Zakai Ba'amiraso Ani Rashai B'Chashichaso Mi Bo'ilei! Exclamation point. Really, Abba Shol should have said, not anything that I'm allowed to discuss is also an activity for which I'm allowed to go to the edge of the tchum for, but rather he should have said, anything that I'm not allowed to discuss, I'm not allowed to go. Because if he's talking about the part of the Mishnah which was addressing something that you're not allowed to do, he shouldn't have put it in the positive, he should have put it in as a negative statement. So rather the Gemara says, Ela aseifa koi. But rather, let's say, perhaps he's going on the Seifa of Machshechu Lishmar Umevi Peros Biyado. But what you are allowed to do is go to the edge of the Tchum to see how your produce is faring, and if after Shabbos you want to bring some back, since that was not your primary objective, it's okay. But the Gemara says, but that's also problematic, because Hai Kol Sha'ani Zakai B'Chashicha So Rashayani Ba'Mirasomi Boile. Then Abba Shol is making a fundamental error in the way that he's phrasing his statement. He says that anything that I'm allowed to discuss, I'm allowed, for that purpose, I'm also allowed to go to the edge of my tchum. Right? But he should have said just the opposite. Anything for which I'm allowed to go to the edge of my tchum, I'm also allowed to discuss on Shabbos, because the topic of the Mishnah of what you are allowed to do is to go to the edge of the tchum. So if he's saying that he wants to broaden that topic and say that now that we're talking about the permissibility of going to the edge of the tchum, let me broaden it and say that if you're allowed to go to the edge of the tchum for something, you're also allowed to discuss it on Shabbos, that would be the way to phrase it. But he doesn't phrase it that way. He says anything that I'm allowed to discuss, I'm allowed to go to the edge of the tchum for. But that's not the topic of our Mishnah is discussing when we're talking about things that you're allowed to do. So the Gemara says it's problematic regardless of whether Abba Shaul is going on the Reish or is going on the Seifa. So the Gemara answers, La'olam ha-Seifa koi, va'Abba Shaul aha koi. So the Gemara answers that really Abba Shaul is addressing the case of the Seifa, which is the permissibility to go to the edge of the Tchum to watch over your produce. And if at the end you decide that you want to bring produce back with you after Shabbos, that's perfectly fine. And on that, Abba Shaul is entering into a discussion of the permissibility to discuss going, watching over your produce and so forth. And he's broadening the topic and making it a generic subject. The way Rashi explains it, as we'll see this discussion unfolding momentarily, is that Abba Shaul took it as a given, and he knew that the Chachamim took it as a given as well, that there are certain things that you're allowed to discuss that are non-malacha related in nature, that you're allowed to discuss those things on Shabbos. And therefore Abba Shaul said, well, now that you, the Chachamim, acknowledge that there are certain things you're allowed to discuss, you're allowed to go to the edge of the Tchum for those things as well. The Amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Mutter la'adam lomar l'chaveiro shemor li peros shabitchumecha v'ani eshmor l'chaperos shabitchumi. Because as we know, it's a well-known halacha that a person is allowed to say to his friend, listen, I have produce in an orchard that is in your environs, and I don't have access to that on Shabbos because it's outside my tchum. You have produce in an orchard that's in my environs that you don't have access to because it's outside of your tchum, but it's within my tchum. Keep an eye on my produce, I'll keep an eye on your produce. And you're allowed to have those discussions on Shabbos. So therefore, Kamar Abba Shaul Tanakama, Mila Modis the Mutter Adam Lamar Lachaber Shmor Li Peros Shabitchumech Mani Shmor Lachaber Shabitchumi. So therefore, Abba Shaul says, since you acknowledge that that's permitted, then you should broaden the topic and say, look, don't tell me specifically that it's permitted to go to the border to watch over produce. You already acknowledge that it's permitted to discuss watching over produce on Shabbos. Why don't you broaden the topic and say it generically so that you can include an entire category of activities and say rather as follows. Anything that you're allowed to discuss, you're also allowed to go to the edge of the tchum for. And therefore you'll be inclusive of more things than just watching over produce. So the Gemara's question therefore is, okay, so Taka, let's think about this. Yes?
How do two guys with different tchums talk about this thing? They're not even in
proximity. Well, as we'll learn when we learn Maseches Eruvin, the tchumen can intersect.
You mean BAYT?
Okay, so they could be in a certain part where they share accessibility to each other, but they can't get back to their respective orchards. Okay, so the Gemara now says. So the question is, Klal Asuyei Mai. So what is Abba Shaul coming to expand? In other words, what other things would you be allowed to go to the edge of the tchum for that is not included in the statement of our Mishnah about going to watch your produce? So Lasuyei Hadatanu Rabban, and we're going to see, the Brisa says, and this is actually going to be our next Mishnah as well, Ein Machshichan ala tchum lahavi behema, that you're not allowed to go to the edge of the tchum to schlep an animal. Tosfos explains that we're talking about an animal that cannot walk on its own weight. It needs to be carried, so that you're not allowed to do because it involves doing a malacha. But haisa omed es chutz l'tchum korei lavi hiba'a. But if the animal is standing right outside the tchum, then you're allowed to go to the edge of the tchum and say sui, right, and have the animal run towards you. That is okay. And then this is where we get to the case of Abba Shaul. Klal Omer Abba Shaul, Kol Sha'ani Zakai Ba'amiraso, Rashai Ani Lahachshech Alav. That anything that a person is allowed to discuss on Shabbos, for that activity, he's also allowed to go to the edge of the Tchum. U'machshich and lefakeach aliskei kalav aliskei hameis lahavilo aron v'tachrichin. That you're allowed to go to the edge of the border to take care of a chasana. In other words, you know that you need to make a chasana, let's say Motzei Shabbos, and you need to still take care of certain needs for the caterer or whatever it is. So you're allowed to stand as Shabbos afternoon. You can go all the way up to the border to be able to prepare to travel further beyond the Tchum Shabbos to be able to fetch whatever you need. And the same thing can be done to take care of the needs of a burial. That even though you're not allowed to bury the dead on Shabbos, but you can do certain things like going up to the Tchum in order to immediately after Shabbos go to fetch a casket or tachrichin or shrouds that are outside the Tchum. Va'omrim lo, leich l'makom ploni, and furthermore, you're even allowed to say to a friend on Shabbos that right after Shabbos is over, I want you to go to a certain place and purchase the aron and the tachrichim, the casket and the shrouds. V'im lo matzasa b'makom ploni, havei mimakom ploni. And if you can't find it in the first place where I'm sending you to, go to place B. Lo matzasa b'mana havei b'masam. And if you can't, they won't sell it to you for 100, then you can pay 200. In other words, tell them how much to pay. And Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Yehuda, Omer, V'vad shelo yaskelo sikum mekach, and he says, no, you're not allowed to mention prices. That's the limitation that he puts on it, but the Chachamim don't put such limitations. Let's go on to the next Mishnah. Machshichan al atchum lefakeach al iskei kalav al iskei hameis, lahavi lo aron v'tachrichin. That you're allowed to go to the edge of the tchum to prepare for the chasana, or to prepare for the needs of the burial, to fetch the casket and the shrouds. Nachri shehevi chalilin b'Shabbos al yispod behen Yisrael, ela imkein bo'o mimakom karov. Another halacha, that if a Gentile brings flutes for the purpose of a funeral, they used to use flutes at a funeral, they would play some kind of very mournful dirge while the women were crying, and that was, did you ever play one of these, Rabbi Sonowin? No? That's not a gig you'd like to get, right? Right? We don't really do the a gig's a gig. we don't really do this anymore, but this was the common practice in the times of the Mishnah. Now, if a Gentile brings flutes for the express purpose of attending to a Jewish funeral, and he brings those flutes on Shabbos, then we never allow a Jew to use those flutes, even during the week. In other words, those flutes are permanently forbidden as a penalty. And the reason is because it's clearly indicated that this flute was designated specifically for a Jewish funeral. And so the rabbis put an additional sort of penalty upon this kind of situation. Unless, however, you can ascertain that they came from nearby, in which case the Gentile did not have to bring them from outside the Tchum. Asulo aron b'chafrulo kever, yikaver bo Yisrael. If a Gentile has constructed a casket or dug a grave, then a Jew, and he did it on Shabbos, then a Jew is allowed to, after Shabbos, use that grave and use that casket. However, v'im b'shvil Yisrael lo yikaver bo olamas. But if it was dug expressly for a Jew, or the casket was constructed expressly for a Jew, so then you're never allowed to use that casket or that grave. You see from here that while today the practice is to have a Beis Olam that's exclusively for Jews, that wasn't the universal practice. There were times when, if you needed a place to bury your loved one, you didn't necessarily immediately go straight to the Jewish cemetery. You might have said, "Oh, there's an available grave in a field nearby my house, and I'll bury my loved one there." So if a Gentile says, "Well, I just so happen to have dug a hole in my yard and I'm willing to sell it to you," then you're allowed to purchase it from him. All right. So the Gemara now says, "Mai mimakom karov." When the Mishnah says that you're allowed to bury your loved one in a mimakom karov is where we talked about the flutes. When we said that you're allowed to use those flutes after Shabbos, as long as you can ascertain that it was brought from a nearby place, what is that really? What's the definition? So we have a machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Rav Omer mimakom karov mamish. Rav learns it literally, that you have to know for a fact that he did not travel outside the Tchum to transport these flutes. And Shmuel Omer chayshinan shema michutz lachom alanu. And Shmuel says no. Shmuel is much more liberal, and he says as long as there's the possibility that the Gentile was just right outside the city walls from before Shabbos, and he just happened to camp out right outside the city walls, and he brought the flutes in from right outside the walls of the city, then it's no problem. In other words, you don't need, according to Shmuel, you don't need to know for a fact that he was within the Tchum. As long as it's conceivable that he was within the Tchum, then those flutes are permitted. Okay? So now, Dika Masnisim Kavase de Shmuel. And it seems that our Mishnah is supportive of Shmuel because Dikatani Asalo Aron, B'chafr lo kever yukaver bo Yisrael, ala misveik ashari hachanam misveik ashar. Because if we look at the case of the digging of the grave or the construction of the casket, it just says in our Mishnah that as long as a Gentile dug a grave or built a casket, you're allowed to use it. The only time that it's usher is when you know for a fact that he did it for a Jew. Whereas as long as it's just conceivable that he didn't do it for a Jew, that he did it for a non-Jew, then it becomes permitted. So you don't have to know for sure that he didn't do it for a Jew. So too over here, you don't have to know for sure that he came from within the tchum. As long as it's conceivable that he came from within the tchum, then according to Shmuel, the flutes are permitted. Now, there's a big whole sichsuch in the whole way, the proper girsa, but we're going to learn like Rashi's second version, and like the Gra, the Tanya Kavase de Shmuel. We also have a brisa that is supportive of Shmuel. And what does the brisa say? It says, Ir she Yisrael v'nachrim dorim ba, b'haisa ba merchatz hamerachetzes b'Shabbos. That if you have a town where Jews and non-Jews occupy this town, and there's a bathhouse that is operating on Shabbos, where the water is heated up on Shabbos. So the problem is that for me to go to that bathhouse right after Shabbos, I will be benefiting from malacha that was done on Shabbos. So imrov nachrim la'erev rochetz bo miyad, imrov Yisrael yamtim ad kedei sheyecha muchamim. That if the majority of the town is Gentile and there's a minority of Jews, so then I'm allowed to go to the bathhouse immediately after Shabbos because the malacha was not done for me, it was done for the majority of the non-Jews. If there's a majority of Jews in the town, then there's a problem, that this water then was heated up for Jews, even if it was done by Gentiles. The rabbi said you're not allowed to benefit from that malacha. You have to wait the time that it would take to heat up that water anew, which would probably take several hours, and then only then can you go to the bathhouse. And mechza al mechza ad kedei sheyech muchamen. And if it's 50-50, there too also you have to be machmir, because invariably when the Gentiles did the malacha, they were heating it up for Jews in mind as well. So Rabbi Yehuda Omer ba'ambati kitana, and this is now we get to the support for Shmuel, which is from the sheet of Rabbi Yehuda. He says if there's a small bathtub that's available, and the water was heated up, and you want to use that bathtub immediately after Shabbos. So how much time do you have to wait until after Shabbos, right? So he says like this, Im yesh ba reshus rochetz ba miyad. If there's a governmental authority, then you can take a bath right away after Shabbos. Now what does that mean? My reshus, what do you mean a governmental authority? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Rav Yitzchak, Bereita Rav Yehuda, Im yesh ba adam chashuv sheyesh lo asara avadim, shemechamim lo yud kum kumin bevas echas be'ambati ketani muter lirchotz ba miyad. That it means as follows. When we say a governmental authority, we're talking about an Adam Chashuv. We're talking about an important, wealthy, aristocratic individual who has 10 servants at his disposal. And if these 10 servants could theoretically heat up, each one of the servants would heat up a small pail of water, which doesn't take a very long time. It would probably take 10 minutes, 15 minutes to bring to a very high temperature a pail of water. Right? And then each pail could be dumped into that bathtub, so that by the time you get 10 pails of water in the bathtub, you got a full bathtub of hot water. So it's therefore all you need to do is to know that it's conceivable that the water was heated up after Shabbos in order to allow you to take that bath on Shabbos. After Shabbos, on Motzei Shabbos, right? You don't need to know for sure that the water was heated up after Shabbos. As long as it's conceivable that the water of that bathtub was heated up after Shabbos, it's now permitted for you to take that bath after Shabbos. Okay, so that's a support to Shmuel, who says you don't need to know for sure that it was heated after Shabbos, as long as in theory it could have been, so then it's okay. Let us go on. Asalo aron v'chafru lo kever. If Gentiles dug a grave or they built a casket, so then it's permitted for me to benefit from that for my loved one. So the Gemara says, okay, I understand that we're liberal when it comes to a bathhouse, but we should be more machmir, the Gemara says, by a grave, because a grave is specifically designated. People for all perpetuity are going to know that grave was dug from my loved one. It's going to be a bizayon. So the Gemara's question really is, why shouldn't I at least have to wait for the amount of time that it takes to dig a grave? before I benefit from burying my loved one. I should at least be required to wait the amount of time that it takes to dig a grave or to build a casket in order to be permitted to bury someone here. Since it's a generic grave and it's not clearly indicated, since it's conceivable that it was done for me, I should have to be more machmir. So the Gemara says, Omar Ula ba'omed ba'asartaya. The answer is that the situation of the grave is such where it's clearly indicated that it was dug for a non-Jewish burial. And that is that it's in a public thoroughfare. So, and since Jews don't normally bury their dead in a public thoroughfare, this is therefore a grave that is indicated that it was not dug for a Jew, and therefore I don't even have to wait bichdei shiyasu, the amount of time that it takes to dig a grave. And why a Jew would still choose that, I guess a bargain's a bargain, a deal's a deal, a gig's a gig. The Gemara now says, Teinach kever, aron ma'ikal ameimar. So the Gemara says, okay, that's all well and good when it comes to a grave because of the situation of the grave in the public thoroughfare, but what about a casket? And how does that explain the casket? So Amar Abavahu b'mutal al kfaro, we're talking about a casket that was positioned on top of the grave that has been dug. So it's clearly indicated that it was constructed for a non-Jew. There too, since the circumstances show that it was clearly built for a non-Jew, it's permitted for a Jew to benefit from that immediately and doesn't even have to wait bichdei shiyas.
Why does the Mishnah say if it's built for a Jew, then he can never use it?
It's a special knas that they placed upon things that are very identifiable for all perpetuity, like a grave or a casket. And so because they're very identifiable and they're very attached to Jewish identity, Chazal put a special knas on them. It's like Rashi says, it's mukcha milsa. It's something that's very identifiable as, gee, this was made on Shabbos, So I said, olamis, you can never ever benefit from it. Mishnah now says, osin kol tzarchei hameis. On Shabbos, you're allowed to take care of the needs of the decedent in order to prepare him for burial after Shabbos. Now, let's see what that means. Sachin u'madichin oso, you're allowed to pour oil and water to rinse off the body. But you're not allowed to move any part of the body in the course of preparing. In other words, when you do a tahara, invariably there's a lot of movement of the body, right? But here on Shabbos, you're not allowed to move the body because the body is muktzah, right? Now, shomtim es hakar mitachtav u'matilon oso al hachol bishvil shiyamtin. What you are, however, allowed to do is, let's say the body is resting on cushions and it's a very hot day, and you're concerned that the insulating factors of the cushions will cause the body to become too warm and to decompose more rapidly, so you're allowed to pull out the cushions from beneath the body so that the body will rest in the cool earth or the cool sand to preserve the body a little bit longer. That you are allowed to do, even though the body will invariably move because of your pulling out of the cushion. Since you're not touching the body directly, it's permitted.
What about the buses?
Yeah, that's the point.
I'm saying not to worry about.
Right, that's the point. Is the chiddush is that even though it's a buses, because it's l'tzarach hameis, because of kavod hameis, the rabbis were more lenient over here.
What's the buses?
It forms a base. It forms a foundation for something that's muktzah. Normally, a foundation for something that's muktzah is also muktzah. Koshrenes halechi. You're allowed to tie the chin. In other words, like take a string and tie, or a rope and tie the chin up so that the mouth doesn't gape open. Okay? And Ella Shelo Yosef, Lo Shiyala Ella Shelo Yosef. Now you're not allowed to seal it to close up the chin shut, because that would be a form of moving the chin. And we just said you're not allowed to move any part of the body. But what you are allowed to do is lightly tie it around to prevent it from opening further. And the similar halacha is said in regard to, if let's say there's a beam in your ceiling that you notice is broken and you're worried that the roof is going to collapse, you're allowed to take an instrument to prop it up to prevent the beam from falling further. Not that you can push it back up to its original position, but you can just put up something there to wedge it in there so that to prevent the beam from falling any further, like a stool or some kind of bedpost. Next, let's take a look at the Gemara. V'amar Rav Yehuda Amar Shmuel Maaseh b'talmido shel Rabbi Meir shenichnas achav lebeis hamerchatz. The Gemara's question is, you're telling me that I'm allowed to attend to the needs of a body which is muktzah, even by pouring water and pouring oil on it, but I'll show you an example of where I'm not allowed to pour water or oil on something that's muktzah. There was once a student who followed Rabbi Meir into the bathhouse, and bikesh lahadiach karka, and he wanted to pour water and to rinse off the ground, I guess in honor of his Rebbe. And Amar lo ein madichin, and his Rebbe said, no, sorry, you're not allowed to pour water to clean a floor on Shabbos, because you're not allowed to. The assumption of the Gemara is because you're not allowed to use water to pour it on something that's muktzah.
What was he doing in the bathroom?
It could be he was coming in to be mezia. He was coming in to take a shvitz. Yeah, we talked about this a long time ago, so I don't expect you to remember it, but there was a whole discussion whether it's permitted to enter into a shvitz on Shabbos. We're going to get back to this discussion as well in other masechtas too. Karka, so lasuch karka, amar lo ein sach, and he wanted to pour a little oil on the ground. And he said, sorry, my student, you're not allowed to do that. So the Gemara says, you see from here that you're not allowed to pour water or oil on a muktzah surface, so why is it permitted by a corpse? So the Gemara answers, karka bekarka michlafa mes bekarka lo michlaf. The way Rashi explains is that you misunderstood the reason why Rabbi Meir said you're not allowed to pour water or oil on the ground. It's not because you're not allowed to attend to muktzah items. That's not the reason. The reason is because ground itself has an inherent problem of being mashvagumos, of smoothing out the holes in the floor. And by pouring water on the ground, you may come to smooth out, on a dirt floor, you may come out to smooth out the holes, which is a malacha. But that's not a problem that exists when you pour water or oil on a corpse, and that's why it's not a problem at all. And even when the floor of the bathhouse is made out of stone, it's still problematic because the rabbis decreed that you can't pour water on any floor lest you come to pour water or oil on a dirt floor, in which case you'd be mashvagumos, you'd smooth out the holes. So now the Gemara asks the question, Kola asuye mai. When the Mishnah says you're allowed to take care of all of the needs of the corpse, well, obviously there are limitations, but what are you coming to include? So la asuye hadatona rabbanan mevi kli meikar kli matchus amanichan al kreso kedei shelo tafuach. That what you're allowed to do is that, remember, we wanted to prevent any nivel of the mace, anything happening to the corpse which would cause it to be unsightly and to compromise the honor, the dignity of the body. So we don't want the body to decompose rapidly. So there are things that you're allowed to do on Shabbos to prevent decomposition. What is one of the things? You can take a utensil that has a cooling property, such as metal or glass, and place it upon the belly of the corpse, because as we'll see shortly, the belly would sometimes distend in a corpse when it would become heated, and it could actually explode. And that would be obviously very messy and very undignified for the burial. So upok kenes makavav kedei shelo tikanes bahena ruach, you can actually stuff the nostrils to prevent air from entering into the nostrils. Ve'af Shlomo Omer b'chachmaso, and King Solomon alludes to this principle of the body decomposing in this fashion in Sefer Koheles in a metaphoric fashion. He says, Ad shelo yeratek chevel hakesef, that before the silver chain breaks. What is that a reference to? Zechut hashedra. This refers to the spine. Shlomo is really referring to that things will always be the same, even until the body decomposes in the ground. Really, in other words, the human experience is constant until the person actually is dead and decomposed. So when he says Ad shelo yerasek chevel hakesef, or it says, or maybe he's saying, that you should. I forget what the context is, but he says, my son, go ahead and do the things that are important in life before all of these things happen. So before the silver chain breaks. What does that mean, before the silver chain breaks? Before the spine breaks, because the spine is called as a chain. The sarutz gulas hazahav, or the golden bowl, breaks. What is that referring to? Ze'ama. That refers to the male organ, because it's a reproductive organ that contains life-giving fluids like contained in a golden bowl. V'tishover kad al hamabua, or that the jug breaks on the fountain. What does that refer to? Zahakeres. That refers to the belly, that it could explode and the contents could go all over the place. The narutz hagalgal el habor, that the galgal, which is also the language of waste product, even though it's really the wheel on the pit, really is referring to the waste product. As when the stomach explodes, some of the waste that's in the stomach and the intestines could actually fall all over the body, even on the mouth of the corpse, and that's the bore. That's referring to the pit, because the pit is the mouth is a pit, because it's the place where you put food. It's like dropping it into a pit. Zeh perish. So that refers to the excrement going on the mouth. V'chein hu omer v'zarisi perish al pneichem perish chageichem. That so too does God say in a rebuking fashion to the Jewish people when they overindulge. He says, I shall spread the excrement on your faces, the excrement of your holidays, of your celebrations. Amar Rav Huna, Amri la Amar Rav Chaga, Elu b'nei Adam, shemenichim divrei Torah v'osin kol yimeim kechagim. This refers to people who forsake Torah study in order to make every day a holiday, in order to, they just basically like to indulge and celebrate and eat and overeat. Amar Rabbi Levi, Amar Rav Papi, Amar Rabbi Yoshua, la'achar shlosha yamim kreiso nivkaas v'nofeles lo al panav ve'omeres lo tul mashem asata bi. A very graphic image, which is supposed to arouse a person to a sense of sobriety, is that after 3 days that a corpse decomposes, the stomach explodes, and all of the waste material that a person had put in his mouth as food explodes onto his face, and in a way, so to speak, where the stomach says, here, take back what you stuck inside of me. In other words, look, it doesn't serve you any purpose anymore, and you were just living to eat instead of eating to live, and therefore this is what happens to you. Okay, so anyway, these are things that you're allowed to tend to. That was how we got into this discussion, but we're going to come back to this discussion momentarily. Ein ma'atzmin es hameis b'Shabbos. The Mishnah now says that you're not allowed to close the eyes of a corpse on Shabbos, again, because you're not allowed to move the body. You're not even allowed to shut the eyelids on Shabbos. V'lo b'chol im yetzias nefesh. But furthermore, even on a weekday, you're not allowed to close the person's eyes as he is dying. In other words, you may think, well, I want the person to die with dignity, so let me close their eyes. No. If they're still, even if they're in their last breath, you can't touch the body of a goses, of a person who's imminently dying, because why? Because you're hastening the death. And therefore you are a murderer if you in any way handle the body while the neshama is leaving. Tana Rabbana. The analogy that the Brisa gives to a person who touches and tries to close the eyes of a person who's in the final throes of death is like a candle. A candle is in its last leg of flame, right? Like the Hanukkah candle with the oil. It's just puttering, about to go out. If a person were to put his finger on that, then it would immediately go out. So you're hastening the death by a few seconds, perhaps, but since every second of life is infinitely precious, then you're committing an act of murder, right? So this has a lot of medical ethics ramifications, which we won't go into now. Tanya, Rishon Megamliel Omer, Harodsa Sheyisatzmu Einav Shalmeis. He says, and it seems to be that he's sort of suggesting that this is a way for the eyelids to close without actually moving them manually. How would you do it? So he says, Nofeach lo yain b'chotzmo, so spritz a little wine into the nostrils. V'nosein shemen ben risei einav, place some oil between the eyebrows or the eyelids, and v'oches b'shnei godlei raglav, and then grasp the two big toes of the corpse. Now, without moving them, just hold on to them. And apparently, the Gemara says, that will create some kind of reflexive response, which will cause the eyelids to close.
There are, just after death, there are still reflexes.
Yeah. That you can stimulate. Yeah.
So
even after their
yeah.
Really, the nervous system.
Yeah, the nerves are still.
Right.
And then blowing it up.
I don't know.
Not unless you pull the big toes.
I never thought about that one.
Yeah.
Teach you that in medical school.
Okay.
Not the
So
one.
it's Yaakov's eyes opened up when Esau's head rolled off on that Midrash.
But that's because Yaakov Avinu lo meis.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh.
Anyway, ve'ein misasmin me'elehen. And anyway, and therefore the eyes. That's how the eyes will close on their own. Tanya Rishon Gamliel Omer Tinok ben Yomo Chai Mechalel Avos HaShabbos. That there's a certain irony and profundity to this idea that a day-old infant, if he's sick, you can be Mechalel Shabbos to preserve his life. But David Melech Yisrael Meis Ein Mechalel Avos HaShabbos. But even King David of Israel, if he to attend to his corpse, you can't be Mechalel Shabbos. The reason why I believe the Gemara uses David Melech Yisrael as the example is, remember, we learned before that David died on Shabbos, and they had a problem of how to handle his corpse because it was rotting in the sun. Okay. Now, Tinok ben Yomo Chai Mechalel Avos Shabbos Amar Torah Chalel of Shabbos Echad Kadei Sheyishmor Shabbosos Arbe. Why? When it comes to an infant, we say if his life is in danger, be Mechalel one Shabbos so that he'll be able to observe many Shabbosos in the future. But David Melech Yisrael Meis Ein Mechalel Alav because Kevin Shemeis Adam Batal Min HaMitzvos. But for King David's corpse, you can't be Mechalel Shabbos because once he's dead, he has no more mitzvahs to do. So there's no more. You're not providing any useful benefit to the mitzvahs of the world by attending to his corpse, and therefore we cannot justify Chilul Shabbos. V'hainu da'amar Rabbi Yochanan b'meisim chafshi. That it says in the pasuk in Tehillim, I think it's Tehillim, right? It says that with the dead there is freedom. That once a person has died, he becomes freed from the mitzvah performance. The Tanya Reb Shimon ben Elazar Omer Tinok ben Yomo Chai Ein Sarach L'Shomim Min Achulda Min Achbarim Aval Og Melech Habashim Nei Sarach L'Shomim Min Achulda Min Achbarim. That a day-old infant, you don't have to protect the infant from being nibbled on by little rodents or pests, but because there's a certain innate, instinctive fear that animals have from human beings, even if they're infants. But if Og, king of Bashan, who's a giant, with his corpse, all of a sudden all the critters come and start nibbling on his body. They're no longer fearful of him. Shenemar umora'achem v'chitechem yihiyeh. As God promised man who was alive, says, your fear shall be upon all living creatures. That only once a person is alive is there a fear instilled within all living creatures. But once he's dead, he no longer has that Selam Elokim, that image of God, and therefore the animals are no longer scared, they start nibbling away. Amar of Papa, Nakitinon Arye Abe Tre Lo Nafil. So we have a tradition that a lion will never attack two people. One person maybe, but two people a lion will never attack. And Rashi says it's based on this pasuk of Umora'achem v'chitechem yihiyeh, which is written in the plural. Your collective fear will be on the animals of the wild, which means even the most fierce of animals will fear two people. So Haka Chazina Denafil. So the Gemara says, but wait a minute, we have recorded episodes of where lions attacked a whole party of people. So how do you reconcile that? So Hahu Kidarami Bar Abba, the Amar Rami Bar Abba, Ein Chaya Shaletis Ba'adam Achinid Meloke Behema. He says it is possible for animals to no longer recognize human beings as human beings because they lose their Tselem Elokim, they lose their image of God, and therefore if a person descends in their behavior to the point where they behave like an animal, they lose their Tselem Elokim, they lose their humanness in the eyes of animals, and that's why animals will attack. Shenemar Adam Bikar Bal Yalin Nimshal Kabehemos Nidmu. That Adam Bikar, someone translate that for me, a human being is Biyakar, in preciousness. Bal Yalin shall not lie down. Nimshal, and here the word Nimshal does not mean he is compared to, like it's normally translated, but rather is ruled over by the animals of the wild. Kabehemos nidmu, because they become in their eyes like animals. They look to the other beasts of the field like they are animals and they are prey, and therefore they are attacked. Okay, so no one wants to translate the pasuk.
Which word did you read?
The man does not abide in honor, it says.
Oh, be a car in honor, in preciousness, right? In honor. Man does not abide in honor because he doesn't act honorably. So then he'll be considered by other beasts of the wild like an animal. Amar Rabbi Chanina, Asr Lishon Babayis Yechidi. Rabbi Chanina says that it's forbidden to sleep alone in your house at night. Meaning, if you're the only person in the house, you're not supposed to sleep there. This is okay. V'cholayoshin Babayis Yechidi Al Chazaso Lilis. If you do, Lilith, the queen of the demons, will possess you. What I believe this means is that there's a greater Yetzer Hara that a person has for women when he's sleeping alone in the house by himself at night. B'tanya Rishon ben Elazar Omer Asei Ad Shata Motzei. That he, also another brisa that Rishon ben Elazar said is that do while you still can find someone to do too. Now what Rashi says, this refers to tzedakah, meaning caveat emptor. Take advantage of the opportunity that you have now to do mitzvahs, to do the mitzvah of tzedakah. Give tzedakah today while you have someone that you can give to, umatzli lecha, and that you have today, you have the money, va'otcha biyadcha, and you're still alive, that you can still do the mitzvah. Meaning, don't push off till tomorrow, especially when it comes to the mitzvah of tzedakah, what you can accomplish today. Va'av Shlomo Amar b'chachmaso, and King Solomon also said in his wisdom, Uzachores bora'acha, or boborecha b'mei bachurosecha, that remember your Creator in your youth, ad asher lo yavo'u yemei hara'am, before the bad days come. And what does bad days mean? Elu yemei hazikna, that's the time of your old age. The Yugiyu Shanim, as he continues saying, that the years will arrive, Asher Tamar, Ainli Bahem Chayfetz, that I no longer have any desire. So what does that mean, I no longer have any desire? Eilu Yemei HaMashiach, She'ein Bahem Lo Zchus V'Lo Chova. This refers to the Messianic age where there is no longer merit or demerit. Because what does it mean, Ainli Bahem Chayfetz? I have no longer a desire. It means I no longer have a Yetzer Hara. So basically what Shlomo is saying is that do mitzvahs today, now, because when Mashiach comes, you won't have a Yetzer Hara anymore, so there won't be any challenge, and therefore no reward for the performance of mitzvahs. It'll be easy to give tzedakah. You'll be throwing away your money when Mashiach comes, because you won't have a Yetzer Hara anymore to hold on to it. But now, if you give tzedakah, now that's just really where the reward comes in. Upliga de Shmuel, and this disagrees with Shmuel. The Amar Shmuel ein bein ha'olam hazeh liyemos haMashiach ela shibud malchios bilvad. That Shmuel holds that even in Yemos HaMashiach, there will still be a Yetzer Hara, there will still be the opportunities to give tzedakah and get full reward for it, because he says there is no difference between now and the Messianic age, other than the fact that we'll have political independence. Shene'emar ki lo yechdal evyon mikerev ha'aretz, as it says, according to Shmuel, that there will never be a cessation of poverty in the land, including in the Messianic age. Tanya Rabbi Elazar HaKapar Omer, la'olam yevakesh adam rachamim al midazu, that a person should always ask Hashem to preserve him, to save him from poverty. Why is that? She'im hu lo ba beno, v'im beno lo ba ben beno ba. The answer is because even if you feel you're financially secure, but poverty could still strike your children. And if it's not going to strike your children, it'll strike your grandchildren. In other words, poverty is an affliction from which no family can ever fully escape. Not even the Rothschilds can escape poverty, because at some point along the family line, a Rothschild will become poor. That's really what the Gemara is saying. Okay? And Shene'emar, as the pasuk says, Ki biglal hadavar hazeh, that the Torah says that there will never be a cessation of poverty, and for this God is telling you. The word biglal is really also, as the Brisa says, down at the Rabbi Shmuel, Galgal hu shechozer ba'olam. The word bigalal is also can be read as bigalgal, that it's like a wheel of fortune. That poverty is a wheel. It goes around and around, and it hits everyone invariably at some point in the history of that family line. So you never know when it's going to hit, and therefore a person should always daven and say, look, even though I may have a good RRSP, whatever they call it here, I may have a good plan set up for me, a 401k. I'm set up, I may have asked from Shana, but you got to make sure that your kids are taken care of, and if your kids are already taken care of, you got to make sure your grandchildren are taken care of, or your great grandchildren. The point is is that daven that Hashem, please preserve my family's integrity, financial integrity, as long as possible. Amar of Yoseph Nakitinan Haitzurvim Mirabbanan Lo Miani. So Rav Yosef says an astounding statement. He says, we know that Talmidei Chachamim never become poor. So if the Gemara says, what are you talking about? We see plenty of Talmidei Chachamim that are poor. So the Gemara says, no. In Isa Demiani Ahaduria Pischa Lo Mihadur. No. If Talmidei Chachamim do become poor, they're guaranteed not to have to go schnorring from door to door. Now, what does that mean? It means, I think what it means is that people will have such respect for the Talmud Chacham that they'll make sure that he doesn't have to go collecting from door to door. That's the way I would interpret it. I could be that there's another meaning, but anyway. Amar la Rabbi Chia l'dvisu ki asi anya akdemi le rifta ki eicha dilaktemu levanayach. So Rabbi Chia says to his wife, he says, when a poor man comes to the door, be quick to give him bread, because in that way your sons will be spared or will be provided bread in the same way. So she says back to him, Amar le melat kalaitis lahu. What are you cursing our children? What, they're going to go schnoring from door to door like the schnorrer that comes to my door? You want to make sure that they'll get bread when they go schnoring, so you're cursing your children to make them into aniyim. So Amar la krak haksiv ki biglal hadavar hazeh v'tana dever Rabbi Shmuel galgal hu shechaser ba'olam. He said to his wife, look honey, it's inevitable. Right? It's inevitable that at some point along the family line, the Rabbi Chia family is going to be someone who's poor. So if we give tzedakah, at least we'll make sure that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, for the poor in our family, will have rachmanas. That's really what he was telling her. Tanya Rabbi Gamliel beRebbi Omer, B'nosan lecha rachamim v'richamcha b'herbecha. The Torah says that Hashem will give you rachamim, and as a result of giving you rachamim, which means that you'll be compassionate to others, Hashem will have compassion upon you. And we learn from this, Kol HaMerachem al HaBrios, Merachem Olav Min HaShamayim, V'chol she'enu Merachem al HaBrios, Ein Merachem Olav Min HaShamayim. That if you're compassionate with others, Hashem will act in kind to you and will be compassionate to you. If you're not compassionate with others, then not. If you remember my Shabbos Shuvah Drasha, it was all about this idea of why we say U'tshuvah Tefillah U'tzedakah Ma'avir Ro'ah HaGezerah. I said because tzedakah, the reason why we emphasize giving tzedakah during the high holidays is for this very principle, that if I show compassion to others, Hashem will show compassion upon me. So we go back to that pasuk in Koheles, where Shlomo HaMelech was saying that act my son in the proper way before all of these things happen. And Shlomo HaMelech says, before the sun sets and the light goes away, what does that refer to? Zu padachas. This refers to the forehead, gets withering and decomposing, because the forehead represents the brightness on a person's face. And it refers to the chotem, to the nostrils. The hayareach zu neshama. And that before the moon sets, that's referring to the neshama, I guess because the Jewish neshama is compared to the moon. It waxes and it wanes. And the hakochavim elo halasatos, and the stars, before the stars fade away, that refers to the person's jowls or cheeks. The shavu ha'avim achar hagoshem, and that the clouds dissipate after the rain. Zuma or einav shel adam shaholech achar habechi. This refers to the eyesight of a person that dissipates after crying. Now, in other words, the metaphor that Shlomo Melech was using is that when rain stops falling, the clouds dissipate. Similarly, when a person cries and he's finished crying, his eyesight at that point becomes compromised, because as we'll see, crying causes a person's eyesight to become diminished. Amar Shmuel, Hai dimasa at arboin shnin hadra mikan va'elach lo hadra. And Shmuel says the general principle is that crying before the age of 40 will only temporarily harm your eyesight, but then you'll recover. But if you cry after the age of 40, then it'll permanently damage your eyesight. Okay? The Amar of Nachman Haikuchla at Arboin Shnin Meraveach Mikan Veilach Afilu Malya Ka'avisna de Girdoi Ukumi Mokim Arvachi Lo Meravach. That he also said that before the age of 40, if you've suffered some kind of eyesight compromise, then using a certain kind of eye salve will actually help to heal the eye and restore your eyesight. But once you hit 40, any kind of compromise in your eyesight That's it. Even if you use a painter's brush worth of eye salve, nothing's going to bring back the eyesight. It'll help to prevent further damage, but it won't restore your eyesight to what it was. What is he coming to teach me? Simply that the more salve that you use, the better it is for your eyes. Now, Rabbi Chanina shechiva le'brate. Tragically, Rabbi Chanina had a daughter who passed away. Lo hava kabachi Allah, and he wasn't crying. So Amra le devisu tarnagolta afikas mi besach. So his wife says to him, "How could you be so stoic and cold? Is it just like a chicken that left your house that you Nunu, it's a chicken, so she's gone? I mean, don't you have any feelings for your daughter?" So Amar la tarti tichla de avira the ivra. He said to her, "Look, I've already lost a child. Why should I lose my eyesight as well? That's why I'm holding back my tears." Savar laki hadam Rabbi Yochanan mishum Rabbi Yossi ben Kitzarto, because he holds like Rabbi Yossi ben Kitzarto that sheish demos hein. There are 6 kinds of tears that come out of a person's eyes. Shalosh yafos v'shalosh ros. 3 are actually beneficial to the eye, but 3 are bad for the eye. So what are the ones that are bad? Shal ashan v'shal bechi v'shal beisakise raos. That if you get smoke in your eyes, or if you cry out of sadness, or if you cry because you're really constipated and it's painful for you to have to push out when you're sitting on the toilet, so those kinds of tears are harmful to your eyes, right? But shel sam v'shel schok v'shel peiros yafos. But if you tear because of a certain medicine that you apply, or if you cry because you heard a really good joke and you can't stop laughing and you're crying out of laughter, or if you cry because of something very pungent like onions or mustard seed that is causing you to cry, those things are healthy. So therefore, we should always cry out of laughter. Have a wonderful day.